Hello, so this is going to be a video all about the Soviet SSH-40 helmet. Now this particular one is actually a Polish clone of it, because obviously during the Warsaw Pact period lots and lots of equipment was standardised between all the Warsaw Pact countries, just as you had AKMs built by most of the Warsaw Pact states under different designations with very minor differences. This is the Polish WZ-50 helmet, I believe, which is basically just a Polish version of the SSH-40. So most of this video is obviously going to concern the actual SSH-40 helmet, rather than speaking specifically about the Polish copy, because, you know, obviously the original helmet's a more interesting thing to talk about, and unless I had an original Soviet SSH-40 next to the Polish one, I'd be not able to show you many design differences between the two. So this is one of the world's most mass-produced helmets. The SSH-40 was basically, as the name implies, sort of designed around the time of 1940. And it was a Soviet helmet, you know, for general infantry use. So it's probably one of the best steel pot designs of the Cold War, along with, you know, and it even came out before the Cold War, but along with the USM-1 helmet, which was obviously also saw use in World War II, as well as the Cold War. The USM-1, the SSH-40 were all pretty good helmets. And again, you know, countries like Britain, we didn't actually make helmets that were all that good. Mark III Turquoise was alright, and that was continued on to the Mark III, Mark IV and Mark V. But until you got to a lot of the, you know, later Kevlar style helmets like this were probably the best level of protection you could get. Now, obviously the US replaced the M1 with the Pascut later on, and obviously Russia later came up with a whole host, and the Soviet Union came up with a whole host of Kevlar and titanium helmets. But this was just basically the mass-produced general infantry helmet. Now, later on they did do an updated version of this, which is very similar. In a moment I'll get one of those out to show you, because I have a Hungarian copy of that one. But there's not much in the way of changes. It still has the same pretty much side profile and everything else. So as you can see, that's what the helmet looks like. I'll just turn around and show it you. Now, in my opinion, the best steel pot helmets are probably the East German M56 helmet, which has a very conical shape, but the conical shape of the M56 actually means it has the best ballistic protection of all the steel pot helmets. And also the Yugoslavian M5985, if I get the name right, which is a steel pot helmet based on the Stahlhelm, but the size is reduced a bit and it's got a very good strap system. Again, there's all sorts of steel pot helmets, but this is one of the world's most mass-produced designs, and it stood the testament of time pretty well. So it's very simple. It's a steel helmet, and it's got a leather chin strap and liner. So let me take the leather chin strap off so you can actually see the inside of the helmet. So how this works, pretty simple. One side you've got the buckle, the other side you've got this. So it works exactly like wearing a belt. Inside it has this style of helmet liner, which is pretty straightforward. Lots of helmets use this, but it works pretty well. So as you can see, there's some rivets on the outside of the helmet. They connect to a bit of the liner on the inside, which you probably can't see. There's some metal bits, and that's what all these bits attach to. So essentially it's leather in a bowl with a shoelace tying, or a bit of string, whatever they used, to tie all the bits together. So obviously that cushion's on there. And there's obviously your profile of the helmet. The slightly higher bit is the bit that goes in front of your face, but as you can see, it's a pretty good shape. Now, you'll notice out of interest that if you sort of look into helmets shape, that the British Mark VII helmets, which they're phasing out now, are actually a very similar shape to this, how they've cut the ridge of the helmet line. And that's because this is a very good shape for allowing you to see there. Most of your forehead is actually covered by the helmet to obviously protect your brain from shrapnel. It comes out a little bit here, which from what I believe is so if you had sort of some sort of earmuffs or whatever, they could go under the helmet. Also, when shrapnel's coming down, it's less likely to take your ear off. And obviously a lip at the back as well that's designed to protect the back of your neck from shrapnel hitting you there. Also, the idea of that is when you're prone and things, your helmet doesn't collide with maybe a backpack or something else, like British Mark VI helmets had a lot of problems with. So Soviet SSH-40 helmets are still being used by a lot of nations to this day. If you look at a lot of Middle Eastern conflicts and things like that, SSH-40s and the replacement helmets of these are still being used. The reason being they were cheap and mass-produced. So it's very similar in a lot of ways to the USM-1 helmet. The M1 helmet actually had a better sort of internal system, because the M1 essentially had a removable inner liner, so you could use, you know, that for several things. And one of the reasons the US M1 apparently had its inner kind of plastic style liner was that it meant that if something penetrated the front layer of the helmet, spalling and things would be less likely to go into your head, so that's quite a good design choice. Obviously, this is a Soviet mass-produced helmet designed to be cheap, so in that regard it was very good. As I said, there's videos on YouTube you can watch of people in America or other countries where they can get easy access to firearms shooting these, and pretty much things like 22 long rifle, 9mm and 45 ACP. These helmets seem to stop without much issue. Again, if they're repeatedly shot in the same place with a pistol round, they will penetrate. But it is interesting to note that these provide fairly good protection from small arms fire, despite the fact they weren't designed to. Helmets like this were obviously just meant to protect you from shrapnel, but obviously it's a bit of a bonus that, as well as protecting you from shell and grenade shrapnel, these would also actually give you a bit of protection from small arms fire. Again, rifles would go straight through this, but, you know, it does give you some protection from pistol rounds, so submachine guns and things like that. You would have a little bit of protection, so that's good. So let me get you an example of the helmet that replaced this one, and you'll see they're all pretty similar. So here we have an example of the later model of Soviet helmets, and as you can see they're pretty similar. This is actually the Hungarian built one. I think the brim is a bit different inside. If I get both the helmets off, we can compare them a bit more easily. But from what I understand, these helmets are pretty similar. I don't know how well you can see that there, but again, there's not much to them that's different. There's sort of more of a glaze on this one. Again, I think the main difference was the rivets and everything they used in the later models. Obviously, this one has a different liner, but it's also made by a different communist nation state. This one feels a bit heavier, so the replacement helmets, I guess, would have given improved protection due to the fact that, yeah, they are slightly heavier. So, obviously that means there's a bit more steel in it or whatever else, because I don't think the liner's really any significantly different in weight. But overall, this was the style helmet that the Soviets used all throughout the Cold War. But in particular, obviously, the SSH-40 was the main one, because they produced so many of them by the time the other one came around in the 60s to replace it, that I think a lot of troops never saw a different helmet. So as I said, yeah, these aren't bad at all. Now the great thing about these helmets, if you're buying them as surplus, you can get these for like £10. £10 to £15 in the UK you can get Soviet SSH-40s or in other Warsaw Pact countries copies, which are pretty much the exact same thing. And if you wanted a helmet for basic protection, yeah, they would totally offer you that. And again, as I've said before, you know, if you really wanted a helmet for the best level of protection possible, you probably want to end up buying a very recently built Kevlar 3A helmet, you know, or if you really had a lot of money to afford a genuine sort of Soviet or Russian titanium helmet. But in terms of just buying a steel pot for basic use, whatever you might want a helmet for, these are very good. Now there's one more thing I want to talk about the liners in this helmet, which is very good before I finish the video. And what you might be able to notice from the liner there is that if I put it on my head, you'll notice that the helmet can do this on your head. Now this is a good system. The problem is some helmets have a liner system where the helmet basically sits directly on your head with a bit of foam around the outside or whatever. The advantage to this liner system is you might be able to see me doing this here. What's going to happen is if there's a blow to your head, the helmet kind of moves like that. Now, if it was a helmet, and I can demonstrate this like this, that sat directly to your head, what would happen is you would get concussion and everything from the helmet hitting you. But with a harness system like this, the helmet will move around on your head like this, so when there's an impact, the harness kind of absorbs some of the force, and the helmet moves like that on your head, rather than actually directly, you know, concussing you in the side like that. Which is a good design feature of these helmets. I know it's a very minor thing, but at the end of the day, if you were choosing between several steel pot helmets, you really would appreciate it if you ever end up banging your head or having something hit the helmet, that it's a design like this that's not going to cause neck and skull damage, because the helmet can freely move on your head. So there's that. As I said, the problem with a lot of other helmets are they do have liner systems where the liner is so close to the exterior of the helmet that this doesn't really happen. Let me quickly check with this other Hungarian one. If you're wondering why there's holes in this one, it's because I've shot this one a few times. As you can see, this helmet's a bit of a different system. The liner is actually more comfortable on that SSH-40 I've got than this one, even though this is meant to be an improved liner. but you'll notice a bit more on this one. The helmet doesn't really sit as well on my head. Again, if I had the straps are all fine on this, it might do, but with this one I sort of find that, you know, it's not as good. Now, one of the improvements they did make is this, where it would go around your ear. Obviously with this one you have the strap on either side. With this one the idea is that your ear sits there and it's meant to be a bit more comfortable and it's meant to provide, you know, better support for the helmet. But I found actually with these that a system like this is fine. Again, I'm a civilian, I've never done military service, so there might have been some military reasons that a helmet liner like this was better, but from everything I've read, you know, there's no real advantage to a system like this. So yeah, there you go. There's a look at both the SSH-40, and I think this is either the SSH-62 or 68. It had a name like that. Somebody will correct me in the comments, I'm sure. That's the Hungarian copy of it, and obviously this is a Polish copy of an SSH-40, but, you know, what it does show is that the overall Soviet helmet design was actually pretty competent. And as said, you can go on YouTube, you can find videos where people are shooting these helmets, and you might be surprised how much abuse they can hold up to. Again, they're not going to stop rifle rounds, but, you know, for the people who just write these off as commie junk, you might be surprised at the decent level of ballistic protection they would have offered against shrapnel and everything that you wouldn't really think they may have done. And again, if you can get a helmet like this for as low as £10, I'd highly recommend it, just because you've got a helmet that may save your life in some sort of scenario, who knows what. But again, they don't cost much, and as I said, this actually has a line system where if you were using it for something where there might have been a head impact, the helmet should cover you pretty well for that. But as I said, at least this size one, there wasn't a size when I ordered it, does seem to fit on my head very well to the, you know, the degree where it's giving you the max coverage without really cutting off your field of vision, which is the kind of thing you want from a helmet, because you don't want a helmet that's obviously going to cover up too much your head and you can't see out of it properly if you know it was down like that. And you don't want a helmet that's riding up on your head like that, because then most of your head is still exposed if there's, you know, from all directions shrapnel could hit it. But there you go. The good old-fashioned Soviet SSH-40 helmet. Fairly decent for what it is, actually.